Leave it on the field is what they need to do, because tonight is the biggest night of her political career. And so we want to talk more about that with UC Berkeley political science professor Steve Fish.
Good morning, Professor Fish. Nice to see you again. And here we are into day 3 of the DNC. Behind us, we've got Kamala Harris, the vice president, poised to accept the nomination for president tonight. What's on your mind as you look towards this evening?
Well, James, I'm going to look to see whether Vice President Harris keeps this momentum going. What the Democrats have done ever since she took charge of the party after President Biden stepped aside as the party's nominee is really flip the script. You know, if you think back over the last almost decade, Trump and the MAGA Republicans have owned the libs. We all know that expression. It really means dominated the liberals. What's happened just in the last month or so is that the Democrats are owning the illibs. They're owning the MAGA Republicans. They're dominating them. They're just running roughshod over them. And some things have changed. You know, they quit talking about just about issue specifics, and they started offering a broader vision. Vice President Harris did this right out of the gate, and that's part of why I think she rose in the polls. What's more, they've been willing to really go on the attack against Donald Trump. For the better part of the last decade, the Democrats have taken Trump all too seriously. They've been willing and even eager to shine the spotlight on Trump, as if doing so is somehow going to finally convince people how awful he is. So that means he's been the news all the time, instead of shining the spotlight on themselves, on their own great candidates and program. That's now changed too. The Democrats are really showing us what they've got. They're creating a sense of forward movement, a kind of revolutionary fervor among their own followers, and they're not taking Trump too seriously. When they mention him, they troll him. They don't take him too seriously. This has actually really turned the script around, and I anticipate that Vice President Harris, who's done practically everything right so far since she stepped forward as the party's the head of the party's ticket, is going to keep that going tonight.
You know what I'm just thinking too? I mean, you're the political expert on history, so you know there's other countries where I was always like, my God, they say we're calling an election, and they have like 30 or 60 days, and we have these long cycles. But this one feels fast because it is, and so I wonder if that changes the game at all.
It's always hard to know, actually, how the length of time to the election changes the dynamic. I think it's possible that it could favor Vice President Harris. What's interesting is she's the vice president, but she's still kind of a fresh face to people. She didn't really take a really prominent role in the Biden administration as vice president, so she can be the change candidate. Also, at least in terms of personal style, she's very different from President Biden. So she can really step out and be the change candidate. And if you've only got a few months before an election and you've got this relatively fresh face going up against this guy who, frankly, most Americans are pretty sick to death of right now, which is Donald Trump, I think the short time span until the election could end up really benefiting her. But look, none of this would really make much of a difference if the Democrats weren't rising to the occasion. For the last decade, Trump has been entertaining people. He's always been this kind of whiny guy with this victimization complex, but he's often looked also like he's having fun. This is what's enabled him to own the libs. But since the libs, the Democrats, started standing up to him and started not taking him too seriously and making fun of him, Trump has just wilted. You stand up to a bully and you make fun of a bully, and he can't keep the game going. And this is exactly what we've been seeing over the last 5 weeks or so.
You know, you talk about flipping the script. I've found it fascinating watching the evolution here over the last few weeks or so. Typically, in Republican rallies, they're the ones for years, really, that have claimed the mantle of patriotism and freedom and chanting USA. You see that often at Trump rallies, but I found it fascinating how the Democrats at their rally have sort of started to redefine and reclaim what it means to be patriotic. We're hearing them chant USA and sort of, you know, giving us a different image of what it means to be proud of America. What do you think?
James, this is an absolutely crucial point. I found in my recent research for the book that I just published a few months ago that the Republicans' ability to so-called dominate or own the Democrats and their perceived perceptual advantage on patriotism really explains a great deal of their success in recent years, and the fact that Trump's still in the game. The Democrats now seem to understand that. Most Americans are fiercely patriotic. We are proud of our citizenship, and we're grateful for it. And, you know, there's some people on the far left who aren't. And the Democrats have not stepped out enough, Democratic leaders, and really tried to seize the flag from the Republicans. This should be easy to do. Donald Trump has betrayed our core traditions, our democracy, our defense of our democratic allies abroad, our immigrant tradition, and so on. It should be easy to seize the flag from these guys, but the Democrats have been a little squeamish about patriotism. No more. They're doing exactly what you said. They're telling their own story about what a patriotic American is. It's a story, it's a very inclusive story. And what this is going to enable them to do, if they keep this up, is seize the flag from the Republicans and erase this advantage the Republicans have had in terms of perceptions of patriotism. This could be absolutely key to the success, not only in November, but long term.
Another thing I wonder if we're going to see seized tonight is Trump's been hard on crime and immigration and the law. And, you know, I think Kamala's going to come out swinging on that.
Well, that's absolutely crucial, and I think she needs to. She has a really great story with this law-abiding, law-enforcing, tough-nosed, prosecutor versus this felon, right, who's never respected the law. Any laws that, didn't enable him to enrich himself, he certainly did not respect. She needs to drive that point home without concern that she'll sound too tough or alienate a few people on the far left. And I'm hoping she'll do that in her speech tonight, because that's actually a great line for her to be using. So far, she has been using it, and very effectively. So let's look to see whether she does it again tonight.
Steve, before you go, what's your book, the new book? What's the book on?
Oh, Daria, it's called Comeback.
Yeah.
Routing Trumpism, Reclaiming the Nation, and Restoring Democracy's Edge. And it's basically, it intends to be kind of an explanation for how we got Trump, a guidebook for how the Democrats can win again. And I've got to tell you, it's only been out for a few months. The Democrats are already doing a great deal of what I suggest they do in the book ever since Vice President Harris took over. So I'm very heartened by that. I can't claim any special credit for it, but they're doing a lot of what I think is the right thing.
All right.
Well, going forward then, typically we expect, and Trump saw this at the end of his convention, a slight bump. Do you anticipate we're going to see something similar, or could this be a big bump? I'm trying to gauge this,
what they're going to get out of this
enthusiasm, that you're seeing at the convention. I've seen different stories contrasting that with what we saw at the RNC, and it just feels like with the accelerated path that we're on with, Kamala Harris coming forward in the last month or so, that there's this, I'm sensing a swell. What's your take?
Well, Trump ended up getting a tiny bump out of his convention, James, and it didn't last, right? The question is whether Harris will get a little bit of a bump and it will carry forward. And I think that's possible that it actually will. I do anticipate she'll get a bump. And what's different about the Democrats' convention that makes me think their bump might last is they really are reaching out to people outside the kind of core progressive, part of the Democratic Party. They are, they're bringing on former Republicans and current day Republicans. Last night they had the former lieutenant governor of Georgia on, who's a hardcore Republican, but got sick of Trump's attacks on democracy and is now speaking at the Democratic convention. They're really reaching out to the center in terms of the style they project, too. You look at their choice, Kamala Harris's choice for vice president, Tim Walz. He doesn't exactly seem like your average kind of coastal radical, does he? It's just a mid-American guy, a regular guy, a school teacher with a very ordinary guy's story who I think really appeals to the center. The Republicans did nothing like this in their convention. It seemed to be just kind of a party for the most extreme elements in their own party. The Democrats are reaching out. What's more, the Democrats are projecting a great deal of optimism. They're looking like they feel good. Trump's whole story has just become this kind of pessimistic, whiny, story. And you got a lot of that at the convention in his very long and very kind of dispiriting speech. So what we see now is a real contrast between the parties. And if the Democrats can keep the attitude they've had at this convention, indeed what they've done ever since Vice President Harris stepped forward as our presidential candidate, I think their bump can actually last through and carry the party to victory in November.
Wow. All right. Thanks a lot. We appreciate your perspective.
You bet, Daria.
All right. We'll see you.